On behalf of the Salt Lake Chamber, welcome everyone to our Congressional District 2 Meet the Candidate Forum. This is part of our series of candidate forums covering all of the major races taking place this election year. We invite you to join us for each of these forums. More information can be found on our website, slchamber.com. I'm Jonathan Hafen. I'm a member of the Chamber's Board of Directors, also an attorney at Parr, Brown, Gee, and Lovelace. I'm joined today by my co-host, Chloe Nixon, who is a government affairs manager at Dorsey & Whitney. We are streaming live today from the offices of the Salt Lake Chamber.
Thanks, Jonathan. Today's forum will focus on issues of importance to the business community. Each candidate will have approximately 30 minutes to answer the questions, and the number of questions they answer will depend on the length of their responses. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce our first candidate, Congresswoman Celeste Maloy. Congresswoman Maloy is the incumbent and the Republican candidate for Congressional District 2. To start out, Congresswoman, will you please tell us more about yourself and why you're seeking re-election?
Well, I'm Celeste Maloy. I am the Congresswoman for the 2nd Congressional District, and I'm seeking re-election because I've been in office just barely 10 months. And I've gotten a good start on representing the 2nd District and introducing bills that are important to the people of the 2nd District and addressing problems. And I'm looking forward to an opportunity to have a full 2-year term where I can continue with some of these things, hopefully get some solutions across the finish line, and maybe even not be on the ballot for just a week or two.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Let me follow up with another question. This is a Salt Lake Chamber Meet the Candidate Forum, so obviously we care about economic growth. What are your plans, Representative, to help promote economic growth in Utah at the federal level, and how are you going to support our local businesses in your role if you were reelected this year?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I'm going to give the same answer I give to a lot of questions because I think it is the right answer to a lot of questions. Utah has a really great economy, and I think the best way to support Utah's economy is to keep the federal government from interfering. So what I spend a lot of my time doing as a federal representative is pulling back on federal regulations that interfere with Utah businesses, Utah local government's ability to keep that economy strong. We have a lot of government rules and regulations that get in the way of small businesses. And with the Chevron case being overturned this summer, the court just opened up a lane for Congress. I mean, we could have done it all along, but we weren't. And the court just told us to write better laws and to step up and do our job so that we're not leaving a gap there for unelected, unaccountable bureaucracies to regulate everything Utah businesses are doing. I'm on the Small Business Committee, and I sit in those committee hearings, and I listen to my Democrat colleagues also say that we need less regulation on small businesses. That some of the things the government is pushing out as good ideas are actually, just more layers of bureaucracy that cause more paperwork, more hoops to jump through, more cost for small businesses. And so what I do is keep pushing back on those, keep pulling back on those, and trying to keep the government out of our lives to the extent that I can, so that Utah businesses can thrive, so that Utah's economy can stay strong. We're known all across the nation as a business-friendly state, as very entrepreneurial and willing to think outside the box, and the home of a lot of unicorns, and I would like it to stay that way.
Excellent. Thank you, Congresswoman Maloy. Okay, so as you know, Utah businesses face significant workforce challenges, particularly with skills gaps and workforce readiness. If you're reelected, how do you plan to address these challenges at the national level?
Yeah, again, a lot of these challenges don't belong at the national level, so I'm going to try to keep the federal government out of the parts of it shouldn't be involved in. However, there are things we can do from the federal level to help with this problem. One thing I've already done is support a bill that makes it so students who are going into technical vocations can get Pell Grants. So right now, a lot of the programs we have at the federal level to help students are geared at 4-year universities. And while we have a skill gap at the top end, we also have a skill gap at the service level. We need mechanics and plumbers and welders and all the people who make our economy work, and they have had a hard time being able to get any assistance to get through school and get qualified to do those jobs. So I've already worked on that, and I've worked with Salt Lake Community College on what we can further do to help get Utah students prepared for the jobs that are available in Utah. Another thing that we can do is keep Utah's economy strong. It's sometimes hard to attract talent when housing's unaffordable, or when the economy looks undesirable, or when it doesn't look like a great place to raise kids. Most of that we're solid on in Utah, but I'm working on making sure we stay solid. The housing affordability thing, I think you might ask about that. If you want me to wait and answer that when you ask it, I will, or I can answer it right now.
Sure. If we want to go ahead and pivot to housing affordability, we can circle back right after.
Let's be efficient.
Might as well. So, as you mentioned, Representative Maloy, with our rising population and rapidly increasing housing costs, how do you view the federal government intervening here and being able to provide some solutions to the housing affordability crisis to benefit Utahns?
So a lot of the inputs to housing affordability belong to the state and local governments. But the decisions we're making at the federal level have ripple effects that end up impacting housing affordability. One example that I use a lot is our energy policy. When we were producing more energy domestically, houses were more affordable. But when we stop producing as much domestic energy, then we start buying energy and the energy costs go up. And when the cost of electricity is high, the cost of fuel is high. When the cost of fuel is high, the cost of lumber is high. When the cost of lumber is high, the cost of housing is high. And when we have this inflation, interest rates are higher as well. So we need federal policies that promote domestic energy production, partly because we need to be energy independent, also because when we're not energy independent, it has ripple effects into things like housing affordability. And we're blessed in Utah with a lot of natural resources. We can produce a lot of energy, and we do it really efficiently and really cleanly. So we should be doing it in places like Utah, and we should be producing enough energy in the US that we can export energy so that our allies aren't dependent on places like Russia for Russian natural gas that isn't produced as clean and is also a problem geopolitically. When our allies are dependent on Russia, like Germany has been, then it makes it hard for them to make good geopolitical decisions that are in our best interest. So housing affordability is an issue with attracting a workforce. It's one of the things that I don't think we should be directly addressing from the federal government. We don't need another federal program, but we need to get our financial house in order, get inflation under control, make sure our domestic policies make sense so that we're encouraging an affordable housing market.
Thank you so much. Next question is about infrastructure investment in particular. What federal infrastructure investments do you believe are critical for supporting business growth in Utah, particularly as the state continues to expand?
So that's the other committee I'm on. I'm also on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and we spend a lot of time on that committee talking about this very issue. And I'm going to pivot back to something I already talked about. One of the biggest things we can do is remove the federal barriers to infrastructure projects. So anybody who's been involved with an infrastructure project is already familiar with this, but an example of how the federal government makes this more expensive and harder is the Northern Corridor in Washington County. That's where I am right now. The county has been planning on this road for 30 years to go around the surface streets in St. George and move traffic from east to west across the county. In order to do it, it's got to go across a couple of different jurisdictions of federal land, and it's got to go through some critical tortoise habitat, which means they're dealing with a lot of government agencies to get this road permitted. I worked on this project as a deputy county attorney. I worked on this project as a staffer for Congressman Stewart, and now I've been working on it as a member of Congress who represents Washington County. The cost of that road 30 years ago, or even 5 years ago, was much lower than it is now. We haven't even started building the road yet, but the process of trying to get the permits to build the road has cost years. And the price of the actual road has gone up a lot in that time. But the dollar figure that you would have to put on the manpower that's gone into deciding whether to permit that road has got to be millions of dollars by now, between county employees, state employees, and federal employees doing studies and reviewing studies and holding meetings and reviewing all of this. We could have built probably 6 northern corridors for what it would cost if we started building it today. And if you're a business or a local government, you don't have the flexibility in your budget to keep investing in something year after year after year when you have no guarantee how it's going to turn out. And you just don't have the money in your budget for that kind of a process to pay people to stay focused on something that everyone agrees is a good idea. We know how to build roads. We even know how to build roads that are friendly to tortoises. There's nothing new we're inventing here. We're just going through this really onerous permitting process. So one of the things that I've already started doing, and I will continue to do, is work on simplifying these permitting processes. I introduced a bill, it's called the FREE Act, and it encourages federal agencies to go through the permits they issue and decide which ones are appropriate for permit by rule. Meaning, it would work a lot the way local governments do it, where they say these are the requirements to get a permit. And when you've met all those requirements, you turn in your permit. And unless there's something very wrong in there, you automatically get issued a permit. That alone would save so much time and expense on the applicant's side and a lot of federal dollars on the agency who's making the decision side. They're simple solutions. There's nothing radical there. We just need to do it. And somebody needs to stay focused on it, make sure it happens. And that is what I get excited about. This is what gets me out of bed in the morning and keeps me smiling. So that's what I want to do. One of the things I want to do to help infrastructure projects.
Let me just follow up on rising costs. You talked about rising costs for a road project. One of the areas that we talk a lot about here at the Chamber is rising healthcare costs. It's a burden on employees. It's a burden on employers. What kind of solutions, if any, do you propose to try to tackle that problem of rising healthcare costs?
So once again, the healthcare industry is one of the most regulated industries in our country. I spent yesterday in Salt Lake City with one of the FTC commissioners, Melissa Holyoke, talking to pharmacists about the things they're dealing with in their industry, the middlemen that are making it hard for them to turn a profit and making drugs more expensive for them to get to patients. And the middlemen are making money, but they're making it hard for the manufacturers and the consumers to survive. And all of this came out of a government regulation that created the middleman. And so I want to be really careful how I answer this question, because a lot of times our government solutions end up being the problem. What we need to do is get more efficient at how we regulate healthcare and get rid of regulations that aren't actually making healthcare better. Every time there's a regulation, healthcare gets more expensive, and the cost has to be passed on to somebody. Who does it get passed on to? The patient. Patients are the ones who need healthcare to be affordable. And so what I'm doing and what I'm going to continue to do is work on those government regulations. We need to look at every regulation and see if it still makes sense. And if it does still make sense, is it working the way it's supposed to? If it does, we'll leave it alone. But if it's not, then we need to either get rid of it or make it more efficient, because we have way more government than we need. We do not need all the government we're paying for. We don't need the federal government to make every decision. We don't need them involved in our healthcare decisions. What we need is a market that functions and a government that enables a functioning market.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So something that we've heard a lot of feedback about, and you've no doubt heard from constituents as well, is access to affordable childcare. This remains a significant concern for businesses and working families alike here in Utah. What policies would you support at the federal level in order to help increase affordable childcare options here in Utah?
Yeah, this is something I think a lot of you probably know. I don't have any children, but I've watched a lot of my colleagues and friends who started out, we were all single in law school, and then we all started practicing law, and some of them started having kids. And I realized that they were dealing with issues that I wasn't dealing with. The decision of, do I put my kids in daycare? Do I try to hire somebody to come into my house? How many hours can I work? Am I making enough money to offset the cost of healthcare? Is something that I still have never had to deal with, but I didn't realize how crippling it could be for women who want to be in the workplace. And so it's something that I have spent a lot of time talking about with my friends who are in this situation, and there are no easy answers right now. The one that seems the simplest to me is that we need to get inflation under control so that families their dollars are going farther, so that my friends who are working moms, who are practicing attorneys making good wages, but struggling to afford healthcare. I mean, this isn't just something that's tough for somebody who's working a minimum wage job. This is tough for professional women who have great careers. And if we can make their dollars go farther so that they can pay their rent, pay their childcare, put food on the table, and have a great career, I think that's the best answer for everybody. for moms to be able to make choices and not be constrained by what they can afford. I also think some of these things we're doing in education are going to help. If we can qualify people to provide daycare and they can get through that debt-free and be able to open their small business and help with this problem, and provide an affordable childcare option because they don't have debt they have to worry about, then that has ripple effects through the whole economy. So we need to make it so that people can be qualified to run daycares without having to be in great debt to do it, and make families' dollars go farther so that moms and dads can afford childcare and make their career decisions based on whether they want to go with their career and not whether they can afford childcare.
Thank you. Let me ask you a question about taxes. What changes to federal tax policies would you implement to make Utah more attractive to businesses?
So one of the things that we are all talking about right now on Capitol Hill is taxes, because as a lot of you probably know, the Trump tax credits are expiring, and it's time for us to do a new tax bill, and everybody's gearing up for that. I mean, the child tax credit, I would renew it because it's one of the things that's really good for Utah. We tend to have big families. We tend to encourage families. So the child tax credit really helps with that. And also just in general principles as far as taxes go. I want our tax code to be as simple as possible and keep as much money as possible in people's pockets. We need as many people paying in so that everybody's got skin in the game, but everybody needs to be able to understand what their tax burden is and when they've met it. I think we have a complicated tax code right now, and sometimes it's tough for people to understand where their exceptions are and what they owe. And what that does is get honest people who are trying to pay their taxes in trouble. So we need a simple tax code that favors strong local economies and strong families.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So as you know, and you've referenced, small businesses are the backbone of Utah's economy. What specific federal policies, if any, would you advocate for to help small businesses thrive here in Utah?
Yeah, this is a fun question because it's something I actually get to talk about every week in Congress as a member of the Small Business Committee. And I'm going to sound like a broken record because I am a broken record, because I really think this is the answer to almost everything. But what we talk about on that committee is getting rid of onerous regulations that make it hard for small businesses to thrive. We do not lack entrepreneurial ideas in Utah or in America. We don't lack people who are willing to put their sweat equity into a small business and try to start something new. What we struggle with sometimes is people being able to get off the ground. And one of the things that makes it really hard for people to get off the ground is our tax code is complicated. They don't always know what their responsibilities are. We have a lot of regulations, and regulations that people don't always even think of as affecting small business. For example, we had a hearing in the Small Business Committee a few months ago about EPA environmental regulations that are making it almost impossible for car repair companies to keep their doors open. We all drive in Utah. Having the ability to get your car repaired is pretty essential to our economy, but a regulation coming from a federal agency could make it harder for them to keep their doors open. Those are the kind of barriers we don't need in the small business community. So my job as a federal representative isn't necessarily to wave a magic wand and do anything for small businesses. It's to go out and do the grubby work of removing barriers, taking out federal barriers the small businesses can't get over, so that the Utah legislature, the governor's office, our cities and counties can do their job of creating a welcoming place for businesses, and businesses can keep our main streets healthy and thriving. We can have a great economy and not be hindered by federal policies.
Thanks. Natalie, we have time for one more question. All right, one more question, then we'll wrap up. I want to ask you about technology and innovation. The tech sector here is really important to economic growth. If you're reelected, how would you promote technological innovation and support tech startups through federal initiatives?
Yeah, so there are a lot of federal contracts that go to tech companies. And one of the things that I've already done as a member of the Small Business Committee is pass a fix to the WASB program, the Women-Owned Small Businesses program, make it so that women-owned small businesses can compete for these government contracts in tech. Utah, again, is a really entrepreneurial state. We have a lot of tech startups. We have Silicon Slopes. We're proud of all the things we're doing in Utah, But sometimes just because of the way some companies have been around for a long time and they're bigger, it's hard for our Utah companies to break into these markets. It's hard for them to compete. So once again, my job is to remove these barriers and make it so that somebody who has a great idea and who has the gumption to get out there and get involved and find a way to solve a problem doesn't get blocked from being part of that economy by a tradition or a rule or just the fact that they're not a big, well-established Beltway Bandit kind of company. And I'm going to continue to do that because we have a lot of things going for us in Utah. We have a lot of really great small businesses. We also have a really great way of doing business that I think the rest of the country can learn from. And so I want to see our businesses thriving and being involved in these programs.
Thank you. So with your last remaining minute, is there anything else that you would like businesses to know?
Yeah, I would like you to know that I want to hear from you. I have a rule in my office that I don't do anything on the small business committee until we've talked to at least 2 businesses in Utah who would be affected by that. And we're calling all the time. Anyone who's willing to talk to us, they're hearing from us a lot. So if you are a member of the Salt Lake Chamber and you want to have a voice in this, please reach out. Make sure my team has your contact information because I am only as good as the information I have. And you know your industry much better than I do. So I'm better when I'm hearing from you. And I apologize for the tech issues at the beginning. Obviously, I am not a tech guru, but thank you for being patient with me.
No worries at all. Thank you, Representative Maloy, for spending time with us, with the chamber and its members that are all watching this live stream today. I really appreciate your time. Thanks again, and to everyone else, please stick around. We'll bring in our next candidate in just a minute.
Thank you. I'm going to leave and let you enjoy the next candidate.
Okay. See ya.
Thanks, Celeste. Thanks for holding with us. We're pleased to welcome Nathaniel Woodward, the Democrat contender for Congressional District 2. Nathaniel, will you please start out by letting the viewers know a little bit more about yourself and why it is that you're running for Congress?
Well, I'm not a terribly complicated person. I actually think I'm thoroughly average as far as people come. But my perspective, I think, is a little unique in the political arena. I'm rural, born and raised in Carbon County and returned there intentionally. I want my children and my family to experience the type of upbringing I had. Not necessarily with, Price being the best town in the state, which I would argue it is. But the fact that growing up rural means you grew up with more responsibility. You were expected to contribute to your community. When you go to a small school, you need to play sports. You need to be involved. Otherwise, these programs just wouldn't exist. And so I was lucky to grow up in Price, the time I grew up in, pre-internet for most of my youth, and got to experience that Americana that is, I think, what most of us are really yearning to get back to. But I'm just a small town guy from a coal mining town who got lucky with college and did well enough that I was able to get a law degree and then bring those skills back to my town and try to help build it in the way I can in my unique way. And that's just, I think, who I am as a person. Why I chose to run for Congress is more complicated, and the more I talk about it, the more my therapist, I think, gets mad at me. But it was a plan I had to do in a couple years from now to run in CD3 where I live. But this opportunity presented itself, and in this particular year, being a presidential election, all 4 federal offices on the congressional side are up in the state this year. It's a bad climate for politics. And I felt that the message I wanted to get out is needed now. Much less divisive, much more inclusive from a guy who does not bill himself as a moderate, because I'm not. I'm passionate about many things. I think we all should be. My passions just stem from, my upbringing in a labor town with unions backing us up and bringing us together. And I've seen us lose that. And so when this opportunity came up, I knew I wanted to step in to run this campaign in the way I wanted to do it, without too much outside influence telling me how things are supposed to be done. And luckily, my party is allowing me to do that. And that's a breath of fresh air for me. It's given me a lot of hope through this political process.
Well, thank you. It's great to learn a bit more about you. So to start off here, if you're elected, what are your plans to promote economic development here in this state? And particularly, how will you help local businesses achieve these goals?
Utah is sitting on, literally and figuratively, a gold mine. Our natural resources are unbelievable. We have the gambit of what we could extract from our land here. We have a workforce that's eager and capable and qualified to do it. And so I see Utah's economic future being less in the development and more in the extraction and refinement and use of our natural resources, from as simple as coal production to the more advanced stuff that we're dealing with, like lithium and uranium, and the really cool energy needs that are going to come about in the next few years as AI develops further. Utah needs to be a little bit more, I think, proactive when it comes to what Governor Cox has called an all-of-the-above energy policy. It's a good rhetoric, and I really like the tag. We need to see some serious movement on that. And so from the federal level, we need to let the other states, not just around us, but on the East Coast and elsewhere, know we mean business when it comes to producing energy and other natural resources, and that if they're not going to help us along, we'll just simply lead the way alone. And so federal policy, we need to all be included. This is a union of 50 states, and we need to have everyone's input when we're talking about federal dollars. But we need to let the people who live in the areas they live in be the ones who coordinate and dictate how their resources are used. And so I deviate a little bit from my own party in that policy, where I don't think attorneys in Sacramento should have much of any say how Utah handles its resources, other than maybe the ones we share, like water. Which is another whole discussion coming from a guy from Carbon County. But I think from the congressional standpoint, Utah's future resides in making regulations that make more sense when it comes to the people who live on the land we're talking about.
Awesome. Thank you. You mentioned that Price is a union town. You also just talked a little bit about workforce. So I want to ask you a question about workforce development. Utah's businesses face significant workforce challenges, especially in terms of skill gaps and workforce readiness. If you were elected, how would you address those issues?
That is a very prevalent concern, especially in rural counties. We have a remarkable resource in this state through our land-grant university, Utah State University, my alma mater, so I'll give them a shout out. But these technical and vocational programs that they have now taken to almost every rural area are not just invaluable, they're incredible. They are giving students an opportunity to become rounded people. You come down to USU Eastern and Price, CEU as I still call it, and you see students in the same dorms. Some are studying welding, diesel mechanics. Others are studying English and art and history or biology. And you get these students all together that are going to go into very different walks of life, but at a time where they're free to express themselves and share their views. And they're becoming better workers as a result, because their minds are much more developed. And so a mechanic who knows Shakespeare doesn't seem like something that would be very relevant. But as you see it in practice, a rounded person who can identify by a lot of different metrics in their life, more than just their career, is a better society in a whole. So I think we need to focus heavily on our vocational training, starting in the high school years, where we have concurrent enrollment opportunities, where we make it more of a general education requirement, as much as history, as much as English. I think our students should also be exposed to welding, to different types of mechanics or AutoCAD programs, just for the mere fact that it helps our brains grow as much as it is learning a new instrument. And so starting in our secondary education, I think we need to really hit those topics hard and give these students the opportunity to go to colleges that give them all of the opportunities. And I would give, again, the shout out to Utah State University for leading this charge and making a program that is just incredible to watch.
Thank you. So Nathaniel, as the state continues to grow, what do you view as critical investments in infrastructure at the federal level that will allow here in Utah business growth to continue?
Well, first and foremost, as someone who just drove 2 hours to get here, our freeway system is in constant need of improvement and innovation. And I would like to see a lot more federal resources poured into the innovation aspect. We look at our road system and it's a constant, let's make it wider, let's make it faster, let's make it smoother. That is important and well with, I'm out of my depth when speculating on how to truly improve these things, because it's not my area of expertise. But what I feel would be very helpful on the federal level is to look at, are we doing this in the best way we can? Is this design concept we have right now of building just more highways, bulldozing old communities, taking eminent domain measures, is this the way to go? And so I think our federal infrastructure dollars will be better spent in the research and development areas for the next little while, because we know we're always complaining about road quality. So if we can't keep up now, why keep doing this? Let's look into better technologies for what makes our roads. Let's have infrastructure plans that go into, maybe we need to change the material entirely. And so that's where I would start. Then listen to the industry experts, tell me all the holes in my ideas, and then let's move forward. Let's find something we can fix that is doable, and let's do it.
Awesome. Thank you. Utah's growing. We all know that. Houses are ridiculously expensive right now. I think we all know about that. So tell us, what role do you think the federal government should play in addressing the housing crisis in Utah right now?
The federal government has an opportunity here. I live in, like you said, in Price. There has been a Woodward in my valley for the last 154 years, since 1870, when my 3 times great-grandpa James Woodward led the wagon train down Huntington Canyon to settle Orangeville. I have a deep sense of pride in my community connections. And none of that would have been possible had our federal government not had a very interesting program called the Homestead Act. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't investigate opening that back up. I live in an area where there is 96% federally owned land. I love our public lands. I think I have the most intimate connection with Wild Utah than any other candidate in any party in this state for any major office. I've spent more time in the dirt in this state than all of them put together. I would guarantee that. I don't golf. I look for fossils. That's just been my life. But the Homestead Act would not necessarily encroach upon these public lands people get nervous about, saying, I don't want to give up our public lands for this. 96% of Carbon-Emery County is a lot of real estate. There are spots where we could potentially build new towns, give people the opportunities to manifest their destiny. We could address tons of social issues using this type of program, not just for housing, social issues, talking about restoring previously discriminated against communities to where they should be, whether it is through what we call restitution or not. With our indigenous cultures, we have an opportunity here to solve a lot of problems and learn a lot about ourselves. We can experiment. There's no reason why we shouldn't open up the Homestead Act again and find a program where we can allow people, say, if you have it in you to do this, come, build these towns. Let's build them in a way that's new, different than how we've done it in the past. That's what Brigham Young did when he came here and made a remarkable success of it. Why have we stopped innovating? This is a country founded on the concept of revolution. Why have we stopped doing that? And so I live in a town where I open up my front door and I see the vast expanse of potential out there. Come to my county, come to my home, come to rural Utah, go to Delta. Let's go to these places and build them better based on what they've already done and enhance those communities, not get rid of them. And so I just think that would be my pie in the sky effort. If I were to be in Congress, this would be my fleshed out Green New Deal, where I do have a plan here. I think this would work for everyone. But it's going to take a ton of work, more than just on the congressional level. We have to get along. And so I think the best way to do that is to put a hammer in our hands and let's go build something.
Thank you. So rising healthcare costs continue to be a burden on businesses and employees alike. What solutions do you propose at the federal level to help make healthcare more affordable?
We have to continue this push to cap prices on medications. That's the first place we need to look at. The pharmaceutical industry is vast. It is, the amount of money that is in that is unbelievable. And with that much money, I would expect a lot more from them, as a matter of fact. I would expect a lot more innovation and in their pricing models a lot more compassion. So I think our federal government needs to take the hard affirmative step to cap prices. Let's start with essential medicines. We're talking about insulin, chemotherapy drugs, things that people have to be alive. If we can't put a cap on unchecked corporate greed on that, I think we're a bit lost as a society morally. And then I would continue, and this might, lose a few more people on my that may have voted for me, but I think we need to take that and go further. We need to cap services. Hospitals make plenty of money. They're not struggling. Even the nonprofit ones are making billions of dollars in nonprofit surplus every single year. So if we cap costs on things like MRIs, on CAT scans, I don't think that would make them less available. I would think that would make the hospital industry, the healthcare industry, get more innovative, get more cost effective on their end, and would spur a technology growth there much faster than it currently is. Put the pressure on them, not on us, because we all know someone in our neighborhoods, whether it is a coal mining town to some affluent, suburb in Alpine. We all know someone who's losing everything to bills, to medical bills. We need to be able to address that in a way that is the most equitable as possible. And right now, the people making billions of dollars in profit can stand to lose a lot more than the people who live around us. And so one bad month for us could be devastating to our entire lives. One bad month for a company of that size, they're going to be all right. And so I think we need to look at this a little less business-like and a little more person-like, and put people's needs ahead of these companies who have shown they just don't care. So capping prices on medications, capping prices on certain services, I don't think that's going to affect our local hometown doctors, our primary care providers. I don't see that being an issue for them at all. And as education is caught up to a really cool degree in that area, we're getting much more people in our communities like nurse practitioners. My brother-in-law's in PA school right now. That is how I think we lower a lot of the costs, is we make that education much more affordable, much more accessible. And we have healthcare providers that are technically a lower billing tier that will take over the market, and it'll become much more affordable even on the smaller scale.
Thank you. Talking a lot about rising costs. There's one more area, and that's childcare. Childcare is expensive. It's a big challenge for many working families. What federal measures would you support to try to help Utah address its affordable childcare crisis?
Well, there's the practical solution, and that's to expand, access to childcare services. I think the more pressing issue here is asking, why are we in this position? Why are children needing to be cared for during the day? Isn't the traditional American model being that one parent will stay home? We don't have an economy right now that really lets one-income households exist in most situations anymore. So perhaps to address the childcare issue, we need to address some broader economic issues between wage stagnation to inflation, where we need to say, perhaps we need to make jobs that are more secure, pay better, so one parent can stay home. Now, once again, that is a very broad stroke. What can we do more practically locally now is expanding childcare options. Once again, Utah State University's extension program, they have grants available for people to start their own businesses. And so we do kill two birds with one stone here. We give people who are somewhat, disenfranchised the ability to pull themselves up, start a business, a great noble profession of caring for our children. So I don't think of anything more important than that, really, than taking care of our kids. And then from there, making it more affordable, because it's not going to be too expensive to start the business up. If I didn't have operating costs, if I didn't have to pay bar dues or malpractice insurance, I would lower my fees. I think that's true with every business. If it's run by a moral person, they would recognize that. And so look at the education opportunities through Utah State and these grants. On the federal level, we should pour money into these specific programs. Go to each state, find their land-grant university and say, what do you see is working? What do you need? Usually it's money. Well, that's what the federal government should be good for, is, hey, we can help you solve your problems, but you've got to solve them yourselves. That's how I work with my kids. I don't see why we shouldn't do it for ourselves. So our congressional efforts should be put into supporting the local measures that are proven to work, not some pie in the sky idea I have because I'm sitting on, my couch one day thinking I know better because I'm going to armchair quarterback this into existence. Find the people who are doing this and let's ask them what works and then let's support them.
Also, a question regarding tax policy. At the federal level, what federal tax policies would you implement to make Utah even more attractive for businesses?
I'm not a huge fan of the federal income tax, but I see what it pays for, and I understand the importance of these things. The areas I think should have a lot more attention paid to them is in those excise taxes, especially in the natural resources area. So you look at the money that comes in to the federal government, it's mostly through the highways and that system. And then tobacco and alcohol after that. And then there's like I think it's like 15% is the other category. In that other category are some really interesting things. In Utah, we have things like an excise tax on coal mining. Now that goes to pay for something really important. Back in I think it was like 78, 79 when it was passed, it went to pay for black lung treatment for our coal miners. But there's other excise taxes that are not that well tailored to why they exist. And they just kind of seem to exist. I got really aware of two with President Biden's administration, when he passed his infrastructure bill, two old ones were resurrected, the Superfund ones, to deal with chemical issues, chemical spills. There's a Superfund site down near me in Moab that's been cleaned up, and the workers have done a tremendous job on that. But with those types of taxes, I would look into why we might want to justify them continuing, and if it's not a really good reason, let's get rid of it. Let's let our businesses keep the money they earned. And if they're small, local, businesses, we have more at stake than anyone when it comes to protecting our environment. I don't know a single coal miner in my town or power plant worker that wants the environment to be destroyed. They care for it because we live there and recreate there. That's our home. Let us tell you how to clean our home best. And so if you're going to keep that tax, then that tax should be reinvested directly into the community from which it is taxed. And so any federal taxes go directly to the communities from which they are pulled. And that way, I tell you what, these rural communities would feel an awful lot better about being taxed this way if we were receiving the benefit of our labor.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We're running out of time. We want to make sure that you have the chance to talk to our business community. Anything else you'd like to share with Utah businesses about you and your policies?
I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk to this group of business owners, because the Salt Lake Chamber is neat, because you have, listening right now, you'll have members who have one employee in themselves. And there's someone listening who has hundreds, if not thousands of employees. That is a room I'd want to be in. That is a room of experience and ideas where things could happen. And so this opportunity, I'm very grateful for this chance to do this. My policies, it's hard because I'm not a bureaucrat. I'm not a politician. I've never done anything like this before. I ran for office once before. 5th grade, Mrs. Martinez's class, I lost class president to Adam Martinez, her son. And this hasn't been 30 years of just grudges going on here. But I am who I am, for better or for worse. I chose to move back to Price because that's who I am. I am everything my community built me to be, and I owe everything to them. Here's those tears I said by to come here. And when I see my town, I see small businesses. I was on a Main Street Commission meeting this morning in City Hall in Price, and I was sitting there with other small business owners as we sit there, on Main Street looking, what can we do? What's going to happen if someone from Bluffdale comes and buys this building and prices us out? What if another franchise comes in? And I, for better or for worse, I am militantly pro-labor. I grew up in a union town and a union family. The UMWA is sacred. When you come to Price, when you come to Emory County, go to a cemetery. First place you go, just go find one and walk around for a minute. And you're going to notice something in those cemeteries you don't see in any other ones. 4 letters stamped on about every third headstone will say UMWA. Can you imagine? What do you put on your headstone? Your name, who you loved, when you lived, maybe a quote, and your union? My headstone won't say Nathaniel Woodward was a lawyer. Nathaniel Woodward was a law professor. It'll say Nathaniel Woodward and what was important to me. And to stamp something like the union on there, it shows you what that means to us, is that our brotherhood, our fraternal order, our community was built on the reliance on each other. And if the Salt Lake Chamber could take anything from what I believe in about business, is that your workers are your greatest asset, and they will endure much longer than your business ever will. Your legacy is them. Their capital investment is their time, their lives, much more important than any dollar investor will ever be. If you treat your workers like the assets they are, your business will thrive, your people will thrive, and you'll build a better community for it. And so I'm not going to advocate for you to vote for me for my policies. I'm advocating to you for the workers. Please treat them how they should be treated, because we are the ones who build this country. We are the ones who build your dream, because without us, you're just going to cosplay as a CEO. You get to pretend to be boss. Last week was FanX. If you want to cosplay, you got a weekend a year to do it. The rest of the year, you have to be real. You have to advocate for the people who are giving you their lives. And for the most part, Utah is the best at this. And I am inspired daily by the stories I hear from my own clients about how their bosses view their workplace. And so for those of you who feel what I'm saying and are already doing this, take that and grow. Take it the same way we take any capitalist idea and grow it, expand it, scale it up. Let's have a union of concerned citizens who look out for each other more than we look out for our companies. And somehow, when I see that happen, our companies grow as a result too. And so that's who I am, and that's what I'll advocate for. So if you are going to be on the fence about who to vote for, but between me and Celeste Maloy, Celeste is a fantastic person, and she is incredible in Congress. I think my perspective's a little bit more grounded to what your workers understand and need. And that's what my position will be if you see fit to send me to Congress. I'll put them first.
Nathaniel, a big thanks again to Congresswoman Maloy and both of your teams, and the Salt Lake Chamber for making this forum possible. We appreciate Pixum for producing this stream today, and each of you for taking your time to tune in. We hope you have a great rest of your day.